First of all, this is a huge honor. I've been a fan since Boy A, and I've seen you live twice. I
Oh,
saw you live in Death of a Salesman here. And then I
oh,
also saw you live in London for Angels in America, one of the best shows of all time. So,
oh.
and I think your performance here as Jonathan is nothing short of extraordinary. It's my favorite performance of the year. You actually won Best Actor for our local Washington, D.C. Area Film Critics Association.
My
So,
goodness.
congratulations on this role, first of all.
Keep talking. Just keep talking. That's like
I know,
so kind. That is the sweetest thing ever. I'm so happy that we got to share a room for, Death of a Salesman and Angels in America together, because they were my two favorite times in my life doing theater. And as long with, to be honest, with this, with Tick Tick Boom, they're three of my most favorite projects. So I'm really, thank you so much for the support in that way. I really appreciate it.
oh my gosh, I love that. Yeah, I know that. I know how passionate you were about those too. Yeah, I mean, I feel like you guys had such a blast filming this movie, even though it was during the pandemic. And I'm curious, if even though you recreated the show in the film, is it something that you would ever consider doing live again on Broadway, or do you feel like you kind of have closed this chapter by playing Jonathan Larson? Would you ever consider doing it live? Because I feel like it would be so much fun.
I mean, I don't know if I'd ever do it formally, but I think if there's a benefit or like a kind of a way of doing it in a spontaneous and kind of joyful way for like a one night,
Oh,
fundraising thing, that could be awesome. But I think in terms of actually doing the show Tick Tick Boom, I think it's quite hard, the idea of doing it again after doing it in this scenario with Lynn, doing his one man show in the New York Theater Workshop, doing it with these actors. I think it would be quite hard for me to want to ever duplicate that, or to try to duplicate it, even though every single time, when we finished, because there were three stops to filming, so we had to stop because of the pandemic. But then when we finished principal photography, we came back again to do a couple of additional things, and then the end of that was incredibly sad as well. Every single time I was like, we all looked at each other going, when are we coming back, because we never ever want this to end. It was one of those feelings of like, when are we going to do the sequel, because it's just the crew and the subject matter, and that feeling of purpose that you have every morning when you wake up and you're like, I have such an incredible responsibility today, where I get to try to honor the ghost of Jonathan Larson and bring him more life, and bring, get send the ripples of his work further into the world than they already are. Like, there's nothing better to spend your time doing.
100% I agree. I mean, you've obviously played so many real life people throughout your career. I can't even name them all. This year, you had two roles with playing Jim Baker in The Eyes of Tammy Faye, and obviously here is Jonathan Larson. But with Jim Baker, he kind of has a tarnished legacy based on the choices that he made. Whereas on the other hand, Jonathan is a Broadway, household name and was remembered so beautifully. I was curious, do you have like any similarities and differences in approaching real life characters despite how vastly different the two were remembered?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I feel like the approach, yeah, is very very different in certain ways, because one of these characters I felt very very close to and a kinship with, and that's John. And then there's Jim Baker, who I felt was the biggest stretch I've ever had, in terms of feeling so far away from how I live my life and who I am as a person, and his physicality, his voice, like all of these things. It was the biggest stretch I've ever had to do. But in terms of honoring the humanity of a person, the approach is the same. It's just much easier to honor the humanity of John, and it was much more painful to honor the humanity of Jim, because he was someone that filled himself up with external validation through money and through fame and affirmation in that way. And there was and therefore it became this kind of toxic experience in inhabiting him. Whereas with John, it was the opposite. He had nothing externally. He only had the eternal things, and that's what made him made him a spiritually very rich person. He had friendship. He had love in his life. He had creativity. He had his calling. He had art. He had music. He had story, and he had a community. And he was poor, he was destitute, he couldn't afford to make ends meet, but he had everything he needed. And I find that that difference to be quite fascinating, actually. But in terms of approaching, no, the responsibility is the same. You have to honor the person, the essence of the person, to the best degree that you can.
Well, congratulations on both films. I love this performance so much. It makes me cry every time, especially when he hugs, Michael. It's just so good. I love it. You'll be speaking to one of my best friends, Kylie, soon. It's also like her favorite movie of the year. So,
Oh,
congratulations, Andrew. This was literally such an honor. I'm so happy you did this little extra press day.
so glad to talk to you. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Andrew. Bye.